October 27th, 2015 meeting minutes. Are there any corrections or additions?
I move they be accepted as written.
I second.
It's been properly moved and second that the minutes of October 27, 2015 be accepted as written. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor show by raise of the right hand. The motion is approved unanimously.
Mr. Chairman, I'll pass the orders around.
Thank you. We have no old business. We'll move directly into new business. I call your attention to application 16-92003. That's a special exception request to allow the construction of an expansion containing 60 beds to the existing nursing home at 550 East Gate Avenue. We are going to deviate and hear both the application, the next application, and this one together, but we will require separate motions for each. And that's, the other application is 16-93006. That is a variance for a 11.5-foot setback from the required 50-foot setback for that same construction and expansion at 550 East Gate Road. To the city, has these been properly posted?
Yes, sir, it has.
Any inquiries that you wish to share with the board?
No, sir, no, I'm not aware of any inquiries.
Thank you. Presentation.
Chairman, some of you may remember this property from a previous special exception that was granted several years ago. This is at 550 Eastgate Drive. The special exception application, if I can forward a little bit, that was approved previously was for 60 beds, and this was the configuration or the footprint of the project. The current, what's before you today, back up here, and there it is. As you see, is a different footprint, and is also is larger than what was previously approved. So it needs to come back for y'all for the special exception process again. They're requesting it'll have 60 additional beds, and the expansion would bring the facility up to a total of 120 beds. 120 beds was approved at the last meeting. I think the reconfiguration in the building is a lot because of the number of private rooms is being increased on this application. It's sited on 13.31 acres. The current skilled nursing facility is a little over 29,000 square feet in size. The expansion after the previous application that you heard would have had the size of the facility at almost 55,000 square feet. This expansion would bring that square footage to 61,487 square feet. The previous request called for 20 private rooms and 20 semi-private rooms. This one calls for 40 private and 10 semi-private rooms. The previous plan had it, one of the questions on the previous plan was about parking, and they added 20 stalls, bringing up total to 103 stalls. The current plan calls for an additional 48 stalls and restriping of some, so you'll have 126 parking stalls. There was some concern in the previous application with nursing students and those type people using the facility of having adequate parking, and they've kind of stepped that up a little bit to try to accommodate that. The variance request is basically, if you look on the southern east Yeah, usually there's, there you go. In this area here, the addition in that area is for a porch, and that would be the portion that would encroach into the required 50-foot setback. Since this is group living, you know, you have the normal setbacks for the RML zoning district, but when you have group living, it requires 50 feet from any property line. And part of the reason for that increased setback is whenever you look at what group living includes, it includes, got it marked here because I figured y'all would ask. Includes drug and alcohol treatment and alternative and post-incarceration facilities, nursing and convalescent homes, residential assisted living facilities not having individual dwelling units, orphanages, dormitories, fraternities, sororities, and monasteries and convents. So you see the purpose of why you had the 50-foot there.
Now, there would be no changes to the buffer zone, either the required buffer or the natural buffer that's there between the nursing home and the hotel.
Correct. That's my understanding, yes, sir.
Do we have questions from the board to the city?
President, Mr. Chairman. So in your mind, the increased zoning requirement for this use, this specific use, nursing home, was not in the same category as dormitories and everything else. Your feeling is that this particular use wouldn't necessarily it warrant as far as the logic for establishing the greater setback.
I think that's a judgment that the board needs to make. There is certainly a difference between a fraternity house or a dormitory, that type of use, and a skilled nursing facility.
Well,
You would-
having lived in a fraternity house, I can see why the neighbors wouldn't want us within 50 feet of the front yard.
The other thing with a skilled nursing facility, having the 50-foot setback is the traffic and the ambulance, that kind of traffic coming in, and I believe that portico would be where, you know, and they can address that better than I can, but would not be within that 50-foot buffer. And that's probably where the most noise would come from this facility.
And that particular intrusion would border the east, what do we call that?
Eastgate Drive, yes.
Eastgate Drive, which is also a drive with an island in between.
Yes, sir.
Looking at the rest of the addition, does the new footprint, none of the rest of the improved footprint would intrude into any of the required setbacks?
Correct.
Do they intrude any further or toward the setbacks than the original plan? I'm particularly concerned with the extensions to the east.
I'm not for sure, but to the east is vacant land, zone general business, and the hotel on the other side of that. So it wouldn't be too, you still have the 50-foot there, and it's not back, that particular setback wouldn't be to a residential area.
But they'd still be 50 feet from that border.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm curious, why are we hearing this? Did the approval of June 25th, 2013 turn into a pumpkin or what?
No, so they have maintained through their vested rights the ability to build the one that was approved then. But the footprint of the building has changed. They've added the square footage. And so, in my term, the way I look at it, it's not the same approval that y'all gave previously. And by it's being a substantially different project, we need to have y'all hear it again and make sure it's still something that meets the board's approval.
I'm just trying to make sure that you keep us busy each month.
One other question, Mr. Chairman. If we approve this, it would be with the understanding that it meet the architecturally similar to the surrounding residential area. Would the planning director take responsibility for enforcing that as the plans are developed?
Yes, sir. We would, and actually, going back to the conditional use, back when the city council approved the original construction, that's one of the standards that was in there, and we would certainly think that should be brought forward and integrated into this project, and we would work to make sure that the new addition is compatible with the old one.
Would it be necessary to put that requirement into the order?
It would be good for it to be there. I was thinking that was one of our recommendations, a
I
possibility.
didn't see it specifically.
Yes. In the, under application B, and conclusion number 2, I think we tried to address that there.
The exterior design shall continue the residential design on the exterior, and I guess I'd add as approved by the planning director.
That would be fine.
Your response to my previous question generated another question.
Yes, sir.
When I toured the facility, I did not see a right turn only sign or one-way sign. Did I miss it?
No, so that's because they never constructed the addition, so that requirement never came into play.
Although at one time, wasn't there a temporary sign there
I
that says
don't,
right turn only? I thought there was.
I don't know, but that's why we put them back as a condition for these, for you to think about as a condition, to put that signage in. We haven't been out, as the zoning official, I didn't go out and check for that because they never built the building, so they didn't trigger the special exception in my mind.
Now
It was never-
we get the right answer.
Yes,
It was never approved and never implemented, and it was with the permission of the public safety or the whoever in the city would approve that sign. And it was to appear across the road on the island.
correct. But since the project was never pursued, this, that was never pursued either.
But
Tommy, the original concept and approval, if I understand everything right, setbacks were met with no problem, is that right?
Correct,
And so that really wasn't an issue at that time.
right.
other questions from the board to the city?
Yeah, I have one.
Banner?
All the expanded or additional parking's in that area that's currently in use now?
You see it shown,
And they're gonna
if I had
restrike?
it zoomed in closer, but it's, yes, sir.
GB to the east is vacant.
I think they may be able to answer that better than I
Right.
can.
All right, I'll wait and ask.
Is the setback only to be along Eastgate Drive, or is it the entire property?
No, see right here, this little bump out? That's where the encroachment occurs. That is the only part. And the wall here, behind that little bump out will meet the 50-foot requirement. It's only this little bump out at the end that encroaches into the setback. And it only encroaches toward Eastgate.
But the variance is only for Eastgate.
Correct.
Okay.
One last question, Mr. Chairman. All permitting has been applied for and given, or is this pending the approval?
Is pending the approval. Any developer wants to make sure he can build before he starts spending money for the architect and the engineering and that type of stuff. So, my understanding is that, you know, in this case, they're ready to move forward, and that will come after the approval by the board.
Existing licensing would apply, I guess?
You talking about DHEC licensing for the?
Yeah.
I'm not. I would have to defer to them, to the applicant.
Any further questions to the city from the board? Thanks, Tommy.
Thank you, sir.
Do we have a representative from Anchor Health and Rehab Facility?
Good evening. Thank you all for having us here today. I'm Claire Bowman. I'm with McMillan Pazin Smith Architecture, so we're the architect on the project currently. And with me are Andy Schaefer from Covenant Dove and Wanda Fowler, who's the administrator at the facility currently. I think we can answer a few of the questions that y'all have, and then you let us know what other information you'd like to find out. I think I'll start with, so it was a good question, why did the 2013 application not go forward? Why didn't they construct the building then? So unfortunately, we hit the DHEC CON office as it was defunded and closed for a while. If y'all remember some of that state budgeting issue that happened. So the office was closed a period of time, so we only received approval from their licensing at the beginning of this year, I believe. Is that right, Andy? You want it? Yeah. So earlier this year, we got approval from them, so the project picked back up at that point. And since 2 years had elapsed, what residents and folks are expecting when they come into facilities, hence the more private rooms, has changed a bit. So more people are expecting private rooms, and that's sort of what is preferred now. Not that it potentially wasn't preferred, not that people might not have wanted that then, but there's more of a demand to have private rooms. So at the point in time when DHEC gave that approval earlier this year, the facility, the owners reevaluated what folks would like to have when they come into a new facility. And at that point, looked at adding more private rooms. I mean, I have certainly had a relative in care before. You guys have. Can appreciate that having a private space is nicer. So really, they're trying to make this a better facility for the residents in the community and serve the community better for what people really want nowadays. So that's why 2013 didn't kind of proceed as you would have expected it to pretty soon after that. And that's also sort of part of the increase in square footage, which is another reason that we're coming back to talk to you guys about it. The owners have also increased the sizes of like the therapy gym just to provide more space for the residents, not to have any additional beds or any additional folks necessarily, to make that a better space. So that's a little of the increase in square footage as well. Trying to provide more amenities, trying to provide more private rooms for the people who'll be there.
Ms. Bowman, can you answer the question that both the staff and I'm sure that the board asked, why the sunroom in that particular location?
Why at the end of the corridor there?
Yeah.
Well, is this the pointer? Let's see. There are sunrooms at the end of each of the corridors. So at the end of this corridor, at the end of this corridor, and at the end of this corridor. So the idea is that you would have that amenity and that gathering space for the residents on all three of those wings. We find that when we can break down a facility and spaces into smaller areas, people tend to use them more because it feels like they feel more ownership of it. And it's not some big, congregational space that everybody would necessarily come to. You kind of have a smaller, more intimate, more private space to gather. So there's a sunroom at the end of each of the corridors. And
If you didn't have that sunroom, the architecture shows just a plain brick wall.
Exactly.
Why?
So we could get rid of the sunroom, and we aren't required for any reason by DHEC or any other body to have that space. So we could remove that wall and still build the facility with the same number of beds for the residents, the same number of private rooms, the same other required spaces that we would need to have.
You couldn't put windows on those rooms if you didn't have the sunroom?
Well,
I know it's architecturally a good excuse to say, hey, why build an
Sure.
ugly plain brick wall? We want
Sure.
to build a pretty sunroom, and wouldn't that be architecturally better? Question is, why do you have to build a plain brick wall?
And that's a good question, and it would go back to the room layout. So of course it helps if the rooms are laid out in the same fashion. Wanda, I would think you would say that the staff can better navigate the space and better deal with the residents if all the rooms are laid out the same, and they currently are now. So that wall is the bed wall. So that would be the wall that the bed is on. There would be some artwork on that wall, there would be lights, and so that would be the wall the bed would push against, and we would have the nurse call system. And so it's a functional wall for this type of facility, for the bed to go against it. And there are windows on the other, there are windows all along here and all along here.
So functionally, the way the rooms are laid out like a hotel, you know, one right after the other.
They are.
And that's the way they're laid out.
They are, yes. It's a function of the layout of the rooms. If we attempted to turn those rooms or reconfigure that in some way, I believe we'd still get into that setback though. I think that for the kind of size and configuration of the room, we would cause a problem again, but with sort of that big bulk of the building instead of just the sunroom piece.
Your function is primarily rehab and nursing.
Yes.
And is that long-term nursing, short-term nursing, or both?
What I hear, and Wanda, you can again correct me, is that it's more short-term than anything. You have residents who move in and out of the facility a good bit who have shorter-term injuries they need to rehab from. Is that right?
Are these wings laid out to separate those functions? Is that the way?
Not necessarily. Well, from what I understand, the acuity of all the residents is pretty good, and we're not dividing up populations with the wings or anything like that. That all the residents would be about the same. We're not necessarily trying to divide up a shorter or longer term rehab. And they all have pretty good proximity to the therapy, so I don't necessarily know if that would be something that would happen.
So if you had physical rehab in one of these wings, your physical therapy is more centralized, and you'd
Yes,
move the
is
patient to
this
the
room-
physical therapy from wherever they happen to be bedded.
The therapy space is this large room here, so it's centrally located between all of those wings.
So you're flexible as far as handling a varied need between nursing and rehab.
Absolutely,
Okay, thank you.
yes. And I would also say that, I think there was a question about the rear and other setbacks. We're well off the 50 feet for those. In this area of the facility, there's an easement. I think it's a water and sewer easement, and this is heavily wooded back here. So the property line is back here and continues up. So we're well off of that back there.
Are there any designed outdoor recreational or?
That's a great question. Yes, as a matter of fact, there's a fabulous courtyard here, really. The expense that the owner's going to with that, I think, is pretty impressive, and I don't know that I've seen anything like it. They're gonna have like a putting green with several holes on it. They're gonna have a water feature in the back with some fire bowls and extensive plantings and walking paths so that people can go out there and have some therapy and deal with some mobility issues. So, yes, it's, I think, gonna be an impressive, nice, very nice space for the residents. I would certainly want to go and hang out there.
Good.
Yes,
The sunroom on the end that gets into the setback,
yes, sir.
it will be the same size as the other sunrooms?
It is configured to be the same size as the other sunrooms. Yes, sir.
Okay. And then I have personal experience with this place.
Okay,
And with my late mother, spent
okay,
two times there, and the experience was excellent.
good.
And I can attest to the fact that the wings that you have there, both existing and proposed, the sunroom idea is a good one, because it worked at another location where my mother was too, and that seemed to be a little more intimate, if you will, at the end of that wing. And those residents on that wing seem to go to their sunroom, if you will. So I think that's a good layout, personally.
We're thrilled that the owners kept it this entire time too, throughout the design process. So we think it'll be a great space. And I think there was a question about the length of the wings getting longer. They're really about the same as previous. So there's not, it's not like those are twice as long as what we presented before with that one
So
extension.
it appears to be what you're intending is to have a good match existing to what you propose here as far as the length of the wings, the size of the existing sunroom versus the new one and so forth. So
Yes,
all the wings would be pretty much identical to what's there now.
they would be similar in length.
Yep,
Yes,
okay.
they would be. And when this facility was originally designed, it was always the intent, it was laid out such that this addition could be done in this way. And so there were some kind of schematic sketches as to what the addition might look like. And it's, you know, varied a little bit as from our first presentation to this one, but it's pretty similar to the intent of what was originally designed with the original facility that was built, I think in 96 or 97, so. And the architecture is intended to match what is there as closely as physically possible. I mean, we've modeled all the details and proportions to what is there existing, so. Should be residential and blend in with this area.
A great concern with something this large, covering so much space, I know this is over 13 acres, is the amount of hardscape, both under roof and under blacktop. Does this require any existing retention ponds or storm sewer capacity?
There is a small detention pond up in this corner of the site.
I'm missing you.
Sorry. It's
Oh,
up
okay,
in-
I see it,
It's
yeah.
up in this area, yeah. Sorry, this. Well, and we're trying to capture as much runoff in the courtyard. We have like a dry pond design that goes in between the walking areas, so we're trying to handle some of that within that courtyard space where the landscaping can kind of deal with it. But we're gonna have to have some retention.
Mr. Chairman, just, this will require a site landscape plan or site review by our engineering department. So they'll be going back over the calculations and
And looking
reviewing
at-
for adequate stormwater retention
Right.
and that type of thing.
Thank you. Other question from the board?
Yeah,
Brandon?
my question to the city on the parking, so currently there's how many spots?
Currently, sorry. I believe currently we're adding 48 spots, sorry.
Saw something.
Currently there are around 80 spots, I believe.
I had 83, but
Okay, yeah.
if there's 80, then that was your 48.
I mean, I think when I did this, I got 70, but yeah, there are about 80 spots right now. And we'll be adding about 48 spots.
So all the parking expansion, if you will, takes place in the same area?
The main area of parking expansion is back here.
Back, okay.
Yes. The intent, I mean, I think as discussed at the first hearing and then tonight, there was a concern there'd be a lot of staff who would need additional areas to park, so we've kind of allowed additional staff parking here, so this area is freed up if there are visitors who come.
Can you flash that again? I'm missing it.
Well, you've got parking back there now,
There is parking back there now.
so you're just restriping more asphalt back there, or?
Well, these on this backside are new parking spots.
okay.
So they're really just running on one side of the road right now, and they'll run on two. So you'll just have a double loaded situation.
And then you're restriping the front area to include more spots?
To some degree, that parking's pretty inefficient anyway because of that radius. And we can gain a little efficiency, but not a lot, but we can pick up a few spots. And we're also adding some handicap parking spaces right here to be closer to this entrance when we have that second entrance there.
Are you restriping the radius area?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's what we would look at, trying to gain some efficiency.
You know, when I was walking around on the east side this afternoon, I noticed some cars on the east end of the existing building, but it was just back there. It didn't look like it was really designed for parking. It was just space where maybe they could go
Okay,
and get in near that area. I assume that area would be, that area looks like now it's gonna be used for a different purpose. So I assume that all your staffing and everything will be parked in the designated
Yes.
parking area.
yes, yes.
So access for a visitor, visiting a patient, taking in your original wing, you currently now can drive around to the back and enter through the back, or do you have to come in through the front?
No, you come in that front door.
Okay, so for the existing addition and your proposed 60-bed new addition, anyone coming to visit up to whatever 120 potential beds worth of patients are, all those people literally have to park in this corner here, right?
In this front area,
Your radius.
yes.
And-
Yes.
And how many spots are there in that particular area, or are going to be after the restripe?
Let's see. I can't tell you exactly how many spots
Okay.
are there. I could check and see and
I guess
get
my
back
only,
to you.
I guess my only
Yes.
slight concern is just the fact that you've basically doubled the size of the property, yet, and the access to anyone visiting or admitting or anything like that is still ostensibly the same original parking lot.
Sure.
I don't know how crowded that gets and how tight that is at this point, but
That's true. And Wanda can add to this if she has anything to say. But I would say that anytime I've been to visit the facility, and I've been at different times a day, like I was there this afternoon, I've come in the morning, I've been there for an extended day, and I've never had a problem finding a parking spot in the front of the facility. I don't, is that anything that y'all have any problems with? No. And I would say too that I think that there are probably some staff who park, although Wanda probably tries to stop it, there are probably some staff who park in the front occasionally and could park in the rear and allow more spots for those visitors who do come, since we are increasing the size of the facility.
well, that obviously has got to be the plan for it to work. You have to encourage all your staff to go around back.
Yes. And that was the intent of adding the spaces back there, that the concern was that the staff would need places in the back to park to move them out of that front area so that visitors could park there. And I think the required number of parking spots is only 90. So we're going up to 126.
Yeah, no, I get the number count. I'm just talking about logistically, though. If you were filled there and your loved one was in your new addition, you don't want to have to be forced to park in the back there and walk
Sure.
all, you see what I'm saying?
Sure, yes, yes.
I get you technically meet the space requirement. I'm just trying to,
Yeah,
in my head, make sure you've got, with your L-shaped addition, I mean, you got a wedge of parking that everybody coming in to visit people in 120 beds has got to now park in, but,
yeah. And that area out front is a bit of a challenge because of the grade change. So if y'all have been out there, you know that it drops off pretty
Yeah.
sharply here. So we attempted to have more parking spaces in this area, but due to that grade, you just can't get any that are really workable or usable, especially even if it's not a handicap parking spot, especially that would be workable for people who might potentially be coming to visit the folks who are here.
is that radius because of the topography or just the way that, in other words, could that be more squared or rectangled off to increase the number of spaces?
This radius
Yeah.
here, I think it was a response to the topography, yes. And that was laid out with the original design of the building.
Yeah.
So I don't entirely know.
Well,
but
I think
it
that's obviously more than sufficient for the original structure. I
Sure.
mean, you're doubling it though, so.
Sure,
Okay.
It almost seemed like it was designed for an unusual entry, which wasn't the normal entry that you used. It almost seemed to accommodate the access to the back
sure,
corner, you know where I mean? Which seems to be more of a service entrance than a guest entrance. In other words, I guess that's where the
Okay.
ambulances deliver and not where visitors come to visit. Just an impression.
yes. I think that, again, with the original design, I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, that seems like a reasonable theory, yeah.
Does the board have additional questions for Ms. Bowman?
It would appear to me that almost it would be a necessity that have your staff parking on the north side or the northwest side of the building.
Yes.
During weekends, I can attest to this, during weekends with the existing facility, especially on Sundays when you want to visit your loved one after church or something like, or Sunday afternoon. I remember having to maybe park along the west side. It wasn't really an inconvenience. I was still able to walk around to the entrance, but that's the type of thing that they may consider, and because I would think that for a peak period, Saturday or Sunday afternoon, that your existing parking or restripe to gain a space or two, or whatever you can do to gain a few spaces without more asphalt would be prudent, and then have everybody, the staff, on
Yes.
the backside.
Yes. I think between the addition of the spaces in the rear and then the restriping effort in the front, we're hoping to, yes, alleviate some of those
Yeah.
problems.
Thank you for an informative presentation and very informative responses.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate you having us.
Do we have others to speak to either the special exception request or the variance request? Final call, others to speak to either the special exception request or the variance request. Seeing, hearing none, the chair would entertain a motion so we can enter a period of discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve application number 16-92003. I assume, Mr. Chairman, we're going to do these one at a time.
One at a
as far as the
time.
motions.
One at a time.
Approval to grant construction of an expansion containing 60 beds to the existing nursing home at 550 East Gate Drive as described in Exhibits A and B attached. The exterior design shall continue by the residential design on the exterior of the existing building as to be approved by the planning director. Let signage be provided at Eastgate Drive, at the Eastgate Drive exit, directing a right turn only on exiting, and then a request be made to the city for a one-way sign on the median directly across the exit. The applicant shall replant 170 diameter inches of trees removed when the site was originally graded in accordance with sections 4.6B 2C. If the planning director determines there is not sufficient room on the site, contribution to the city of Aiken tree fund shall occur per section 4.64B 2D. The final order is to be recorded in the Aiken County RMC office. I make this because I believe the application meets the criteria, and like the previous one, it doesn't affect, the main concern was that it didn't affect the residential areas, and this doesn't anymore.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Bud, second. It's been properly moved and second that we approve the special exception request. Do we have any discussion?
Well, I guess the only lingering concern I have is still the parking. I think technically they meet the criteria with the spots. I don't think that's been noodled through the way it needs to be. I'm not sure that existing parking lot, whether they pick up 3 or 5 spots, whatever they do to restripe it, is going to be sufficient to handle 120 beds, having to go through the original front entrance and the newly created entrance to the new building. I'm certainly in favor of the expansion, and but that's my only bugaboo. I guess to the city, Tommy, other than meeting the total number of spots,
Or exceeding.
or exceeding the number of spots, I guess it's just I guess it's just a matter of them hitting or meeting or exceeding the spots, and they're good to go without regard to logistics and things of that nature, correct?
Yeah, and of course, with a special exception, the board can weigh in on those issues from the planning review process. As long as it's laid out in an orderly fashion, traffic safety, the spaces meeting the right size, the right travel widths, you know, the design criteria for the parking spot, where those spaces are located is a business decision.
Right. Then that's really what it gets down to. I mean, if people come and arrive to see their loved ones and are parking in the back and walking around the front, I mean, I guess that's just how it is.
It's good exercise.
Yeah.
Ordinarily, I'd agree with you. Yeah, if this was a senior living facility or something similar, in this case, people in nursing care and rehab, I'm assuming that very few, if any, would have automobiles. So we're really talking about parking for employees and guests. And I have to believe that this estimate is somewhat adequate. Do you have any comments on how the ratio is, the number is calculated, the minimum number, Mr.
You need
Planning Director?
one space for each 2 beds. And as the ratio would come out to 90, I believe it's 1 per 2. The ratio would come out to required 90 spaces that was required. They'll have 126 spaces or 36 spaces over what's the 90 that's required. So they really have about a third more than what's actually required.
Yeah, and I get it, and I think it's a great project, and my intent's not to vote against it. That's not really where I'm headed with this. I'm just trying as a board member, trying to figure out if there's a constructive way to address that or have them acknowledge that as we.
Brenda, let me emphasize what I think you're trying to do, and I agree. I think the board is providing directions to the planning director to take a look at parking, not that it's going to affect the special exception request that we are going to act on, but we're giving discussion information to the planning department that here is a concern without affecting the motion.
Yes, sir.
That's pretty well put. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do we have any further discussion? Seeing here none, those in favor of the motion show by raise of the right hand. The motion is carried unanimously. The chair will entertain a motion on the variance application.
Mr. Chairman,
Judy?
I'd like to ask that application 1693006 be approved with the following exceptions. Approval to vary the setback from Eastgate Drive from 50 feet to 38 feet, 11.5 inches on the property at 550 Eastgate Drive as conceptually shown in Exhibit B. The exterior design shall continue the residential design on the exterior of the existing building as approved by the planning director. A densely vegetated buffer with a minimum width of 20 feet shall be installed and maintained along the Eastgate Drive property line. The final order is recorded at the Aiken County RMC office.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Been seconded by Boyd. It's been properly moved and second that the variance request be approved. Do we have any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I really appreciate the fact that this group has come forward and presented such a well-informed decision. And it certainly meets all the criteria, and it's certainly an asset to the city of Aiken.
Any further discussion? Those in favor of the motion show by raising the right hand. The motion is carried unanimously. That concludes the agenda item. The chair will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
We stand adjourned.
Good.